Hello, everybody. So this is going to be for the sixth grade reading of Anne Frank. If you all remember, where we left off was where Anne and the rest of the people in the secret annex are kind of talking about what happens if if the Germans come into their city, if they flood it, what's going to happen? Are they all going to die? Things like that. And so she's just trying to figure it out. And she's also just finding that she's longing for the ability to go outside. She's literally in quarantine for her life. If she goes out, she will die. That's really where she's at right now. Thankfully, we are in quarantine, but if we go outside, we're not going to die. So that's a plus. So again, she's just kind of dealing with that situation. So we're going to read for 15 minutes. There will be a quiz at the end. In case you haven't noticed the class wall, I have posted information on how we're going to be doing things from here on for this week. I'm seeing if this is going to be a little bit easier and whatnot, and just keeping things private and making it just so that way it's all in one place so you don't have to worry about things. But yeah, so we're just going to try it for this week, and if I find that it's really good and it actually works out really well, then we'll continue with it. One of the things that I did notice is that for the English, the essay, if you do type it in the essay section, it will not let you highlight. So what you're going to have to do is you're still going to have to type it in a Word document or something like that, and then copy and paste it to the essay section, okay? And that should be fine. All right, so let's begin with Anne Frank on the 13th of February. Sunday, 13th February, 1944. Dear Kitty, since Saturday a lot has changed for me. It came about like this. I longed and am still longing, but now something has happened, which has made it just a little less. To my great joy, I will be quite honest about it already. This morning, I noticed that Peter kept looking at me all the time. Not in an ordinary way. I don't know how, I just can't explain. I used to think that Peter was in love with Margot, but yesterday I suddenly had the feeling that it is not so. I made a special effort not to look at him too much, because whenever I did, he kept on looking too, and then then it gave me a lovely feeling inside, but which I mustn't feel too often. I desperately want to be alone. Daddy has noticed that. I'm not quite my usual self, but I really can't tell him everything. Leave me in peace, leave me alone. That's what I'd like to keep crying out all the time. Who knows, the day may come when I'm left alone more than I would wish. Yours, Anne. Monday, 14th February, 1944. Dear Kitty, on Sunday evening, everyone except Pim and me was sitting beside the wireless in order to listen to the immortal music of the German masters. Dussel fiddled with the knobs continually. This annoyed Peter and the others too. After restraining himself for half an hour, Peter asked for someone irritable if the twisting and turning might stop. Dussel answered in his most hoity-toity manner, I'm getting it all right. Peter became angry, was rude. Mr. Van Daan took his side, and Dussel had to give in. That was all. The reason in itself was very unimportant, but Peter seems to have taken it very much to heart. In any case, when I was rummaging about in the bookcase in the attic, he came up to me and began telling me about the whole story. I didn't know anything about it, but Peter soon saw that he had found an attentive ear and got fairly into his stride. Yes, and you see, he said, I don't easily say anything because I know beforehand that I'll only become tongue-tied. I begin to stutter, blush, and twist around what I want to say until I have to break off because I simply can't find the words. That's what happened yesterday. I wanted to say something quite different, but once I had started, I got in a hopeless muddle, and that's frightful. I used to have a bad habit. I wish I still had it now. If I was angry with anyone rather than argue it out, I would just get to work on him with my fists. I quite realize that this method doesn't get me anywhere, and that is why I admire you. You are never at a loss for words, and you say exactly what you want to say to people, and are never the least bit shy. I can tell you you're making a big mistake, I answered. I usually say the things quite differently from the way I meant to say them, and then I talk too much and far too long, and that's just as bad. I couldn't help laughing to myself over this last sentence. However, I wanted to let him go on talking about himself. So I kept my amusement to myself, went and sat on a cushion on the floor, put my arms around my bent knees, and looked at him attentively. I'm very glad that there is someone else in the house who can get into the same fits of rage as I get into. I could see it did Peter good to pull Dussel to pieces to his heart's content, without fear of telling tales. And as for me, I was very pleased because I sensed a real feeling of fellowship, such as I can only remember having had with my girlfriends. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 16th February, 1944. Dear Kitty, it's Margot's birthday. Peter came at 12:30 to look at the presents and stayed talking much longer than was strictly necessary, a thing he'd have never done otherwise. In the afternoon, I went to get some coffee, and after that, potatoes, because I wanted to spoil Margot just for that one day in the year. I went through Peter's room. He took all his papers off the stairs at once, and I asked whether I should close the trap door to the attic. Yes, he replied. Knock when you come back, then I'll open it for you. I thanked him, went upstairs, and searched at least 10 minutes in the large barrel for the smallest potatoes. Then my back began to ache, and I got cold. Naturally, I didn't knock, but opened the trap door myself. But still he came to meet me most obligingly, and took the pan from me. I've looked for a long time. These are the smallest I could find, I said. Did you look in the big barrel? Yes, I've been over them all. By this time I was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and he looked searchingly in the pan which he was still holding. Oh, but these are first rate, he said, and added when I took the pan from him, I congratulate you. At the same time he gave me such a gentle, warm look, which made a tender glow within me. I could really see that he wanted to please me, and because he couldn't make a long complimentary speech, he spoke with his eyes. I understood him, oh, so well, and was very grateful. It gives me pleasure even now when I recall those words and that look he gave me. When I went downstairs, Mummy said that I must get some more potatoes, this time for supper. I willingly offered to go upstairs again. When I came into Peter's room, I apologized at having to disturb him again. When I was already on the stairs, he got up and went and stood between the door and the wall, firmly took hold of my arm, and wanted to hold me back by force. I'll go, he said. I replied that it really wasn't necessary, and that I didn't have to get particularly small ones this time. Then he was convinced and let my arm go. On the way down, he came and opened the trap door, and took the pan again. When I reached the door, I asked, What are you doing? French, he replied. I asked if I might glance through the exercises, washed my hands, and went and sat on the divan opposite him. We soon began talking. After I'd explained some of the French to him, he told me that he wanted to go to the Dutch East Indies and live on a plantation later on. He talked about his home life, about the black market, and then he said that he felt so useless. I told him that he certainly had a very strong inferiority complex. He talked about the Jews. He would have found it much easier if he'd been a Christian, and if he could be one after the war. I asked if he wanted to be baptized, but that wasn't the case either. Who was to know whether he was a Jew when the war was over? He said. This gave me rather a pang. It seems such a pity that there's always just a tinge of dishonesty about him. For the rest, we chatted very pleasantly about Daddy and about judging people's characters and all kinds of things. I can't remember exactly what now. It was 4:30 by the time I left. In the evening, he said something else that I thought was nice. We were talking about a picture of a film star that I'd given him once, which has now been hanging in his room for at least a year and a half. He liked it very much, and I offered to give him a few more sometime. No, he replied, I'd rather leave it like this. I look at these every day, and they have grown to be my friends. Now I understand more why he always hugs Moshi. He needs some affection, too, of course. I'd forgotten something else that he talked about. He said, I don't know what fear is, except when I think of my own shortcomings, but I'm getting over that, too. Peter has a terrible inferiority complex. For instance, he always thinks that he is so stupid, and we are so clever. If I help him with his French, he thanks me 1,000 times. One day I shall turn around and say, Oh, shut up! You're much better at English and geography. Yours, Anne. Friday, 18th February 1944. Dear Kitty, whenever I go upstairs now, I keep on hoping that I shall see him, because my life now has an object, and I have something to look forward to. Everything has become more pleasant. At least the object of my feelings is always there, and I needn't be afraid of rivals except Margot. Don't think I'm in love, because I'm not, but I do have the feeling all the time that something fine can grow up between us, something that gives confidence and friendship. If I get half a chance, I go up to him now. It's not like it used to be when he didn't know how to begin. It's just the opposite. He's still talking when I'm half out of the room. Mummy doesn't like it much and always says I'll be a nuisance and that I must leave him in peace. Honestly, doesn't she realize that I've got some intuition? She looks at me so queerly every time I go into Peter's little room. If I come downstairs from there, she asks me where I've been. I simply can't bear it and think it's horrible. Yours, Anne. Saturday, 19th February 1944. Dear Kitty, it is Sunday again, and that really speaks for itself. The morning was quiet. I helped a bit upstairs, but I didn't have more than a few fleeting words with him. At 2:30, when everyone had gone to their own rooms, either to sleep or to read, I went to the private office with my blanket and everything, to sit at the desk and read or write. It was not long before it all became too much for me. My head drooped onto my arm, and I sobbed my heart up. I sobbed my heart out. The tears streamed down my cheeks, and I felt desperately unhappy. Oh, if only he had come to comfort me. It was 4 o'clock by the time I went upstairs again. I went for some potatoes, with fresh hope in my heart of meeting. But while I was still smartening up my hair in the bathroom, he went down to see Bosch in the warehouse. Suddenly, I felt the tears coming back, and I hurried to the laboratory, quickly grabbing a pocket mirror as I passed. There I sat then, fully dressed, while the tears made dark spots on the red of my apron, and I felt very wretched. This is what it was going through my mind. Oh, I'll never reach Peter like this. Who knows, perhaps he doesn't like me at all, and doesn't need anyone to confide in. Perhaps he only thinks about me in a casual sort of way. I shall have to go on alone once more, without friendship and without Peter. Perhaps soon I'll be without hope, without comfort, or anything to look forward to once again. Oh, if I could nestle my head against his shoulder and not feel so hopelessly alone and deserted. Who knows, perhaps he doesn't care about me at all and looks at the others in just the same way. Perhaps I only imagined that it was especially for me. Oh, Peter, if only you could see or hear me. If the truth were to prove as bad as that, it would be more than I could ever bear. However, a little later, fresh hope and anticipation seemed to return. Even though the tears were still streaming down my cheeks. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 23rd February, 1944. Dear Kitty, it's lovely weather outside, and I've quite perked up since yesterday. Nearly every morning I go to the attic where Peter works to blow the stuffy air out of my lungs. From my favorite spot on the floor, I look up at the blue sky and the bare chestnut tree, on whose branches little raindrops shine, appearing like silver, and at the seagulls and other birds as they glide on the wind. He stood with his head against a thick beam, and I sat down. We breathed the fresh air and looked outside, and both felt that the spell should not be broken by words. We remained like this for a long time, and when he had to go up to the loft to chop wood, I knew that he was a nice fellow. He climbed the ladder, and I followed. Then he chopped wood for about a quarter of an hour, during which time we still remained silent. I watched him from where I stood, and he obviously doing his best to show off his strength. But I looked out of the open window, too, over a large area of Amsterdam, over all the roofs, and on to the horizon, which was such a pale blue that it was hard to see the dividing line. As long as this exists, I thought, and I may live to see it, the sunshine, the cloudless skies, while this lasts, I cannot be unhappy. The best remedy for those who are afraid, lonely, or unhappy is to go outside, somewhere where they can be quite alone with the heavens, nature, and God, because only then does one feel that all is as it should be, and that God wishes to see people happy amidst the simple beauty of nature. As long as this exists, and it certainly always will, I know that then there will always be comfort for every sorrow, whatever the circumstances may be, and I firmly believe that nature brings solace in all troubles. Oh, who knows, perhaps it won't be long before I can share this overwhelming feeling of bliss with someone who feels the same way I do about it. Yours, Anne. A thought. We miss so much here, so very much, and for so long now. I miss it too, just as you do. I'm not talking of outward things, for we are looked after in the way. No, I mean the inward things. Like you, I long for freedom and fresh air. But I believe now that we have ample companionship. Companionship. Sorry. But I believe now that we have ample compensation for our really cannot read today, privations. I realized this quite suddenly when I sat in front of the window this morning. I mean inward compensation. When I looked outside right into the depths of nature and God, then I was happy, really happy. And Peter, so long as I have that happiness here, the joy in nature, health, and a lot more besides, all the while one has that, one can always recapture happiness. Riches can all be lost, but that happiness in your own heart can only be veiled, and it will still bring you happiness again, as long as you live, as long as you can look fearlessly up into the heavens, as long as you know that you are pure within, and that you will still find happiness. Yours, Anne. And we're going to stop there. So again, remember, God is always looking out for us. He gives us nature and beauty to look at. So take a moment, look outside your window, and just appreciate what we have now, even if it's even if it's under hard circumstances. God has been constantly providing us with blessings, and we need to remember that and thank him every day for it. I hope to see you all soon. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.